The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Well, Madam Speaker, the School of WACKONOMICS is open, and this Liberal-NDP Prime Minister is the Dean. What will you learn in this school? Well, you'll learn that budgets balance themselves, that the economy is people and absolutely not numbers, and that somehow raising taxes will put out forest fires. And guess who the newest graduate that just graduated with a PhD is of WACKONOMICS? None other than this out-of-touch Liberal finance minister. She learned things like, once you put Canadians into a cost of living crisis, you can tell them to solve it by cancelling their Disney Plus. Or if you can't afford gas, groceries, and home heating because they've raised your carbon tax scam, go buy a bike for yourself, especially those that live in urban Canada, in rural Canada. This is 9 years of this out-of-touch government that's been nothing short of wacko. And their wacko policies are the reason why today we're seeing 2 million Canadians go into a food bank in a single month, 1 million more projected to this year, and now we find out that 1 in 4 Canadians are living in poverty. Wacko, extreme, woke policies have put Canadians in this position today. And speaking of schools, schools have students. And today, after 9 years of this government, students are going through a housing hell. In fact, all Canadians are living through housing hell. It's because this government spent $90 billion on housing only to double housing costs. And not only did they do that, housing starts have declined in this country according to their own housing department, the CMHC. Yet they still shovel millions of dollars of bonuses to the same department that caused this issue under one of the most incompetent housing ministers, previously the most incompetent immigration minister in Canadian history. High interest rates are a massive barrier to home builders. This is what we're hearing from everyone that's a home builder, a developer, even someone that just wants to get into home building. But how did we get here? How did interest rates get so high? It's because when this Liberal NDP government spent more than every single government before them combined, they created a cost of living and an inflation crisis. In fact, 40-year highs in inflation happened under them. They had a lot of wasteful spending, and what did that do? That made the Bank of Canada raise interest rates at the most rapid rate in Canadian history. That's why we see that Canada now, according to the IMF, is most at risk for a mortgage default crisis. It's this high rate of interest that's stopping home building. It's putting Canadians in a bind and taking more and more from their paychecks every single month. And now OSFI has testified at Finance Committee warning about a price shock as mortgage renewals could see a 50% increase in prices. You imagine when this finance minister and prime minister told people to go out and borrow as much as they want because interest rates would stay low for a very, very long time. What they didn't know was that this incompetent Liberal NDP government would pour billions and billions of dollars of fuel on the inflationary fire that they started, making those interest rates go up. And now, when people are going to renew their mortgages, they're sometimes renewing at double or triple the rate. That's not what they were promised. They were supposed to have a quote-unquote responsible government. But what they ended up getting was this housing hell, this out-of-debt, high-tax, high-spend government that put them in this position where now we're seeing people with good-paying jobs. We're talking about nurses and teachers living in their cars, and students that have to live under bridges. And in some cases, they're students that are living in 16 people in one small space. It's because this government doubled their rents, doubled their mortgages, and now they're in a housing hell. we also found out that delinquencies are on the rise. And it's because Canadians have to shoulder the burden of 9 years of bad policy making that put them in that position. I recently talked to a single mom in my community who has 3 kids. She said that she had left an abusive relationship, moved out on her own. But of course, she's one of those ones whose rent doubled. It went up. It doubled over the last 9 years, but recently she had a $300 increase in her rent. And for a single mom with 3 kids, it was already hard enough to pay for gas, groceries, and her home heating. So what did she do? She had to move in again with her abusive ex-husband because she just could not afford daycare. She could not afford to buy food. In fact, she was already starting to skip meals. She's one of those 1 in 4 that was experiencing food insecurity. And when I spoke to her, she had the exact same story, that it wasn't like this before. She had done everything right. She came here as an immigrant. She did everything right. She went to school here. She got a job. She had kids. She was married at that time. Yet, all she got was a government that worked against her, that raised her taxes and made her cost of living more and more expensive. And this isn't the only story. This is millions of Canadians that are in this kind of situation, to the point where people are asking, why did we move to this country? And most of them are now thinking about leaving. Last year, more than 400,000 people left Canada. And the top 2 reasons were the high cost of living and because their credentials weren't recognized, especially for those that moved here as immigrants. And what did this government decide to do? They thought it was a brilliant idea to jack up the carbon tax scam. We found out last month, again, that rents are at the highest rate they've ever been before. And on top of that now, when it's these same people who are, these Canadians who are trying to just get to work in their car or trying to buy nutritious meals for their kids and themselves, or just to stay warm in the winter, all of those costs went up by 23% because this government jacked up the carbon tax scam 23%. It should be a wake-up call to this out-of-touch government. It should be an absolute wake-up call, the poverty report that came out today, where we now know that we cannot believe anything that comes out of this government's mouth. They didn't tell the truth about how many people were in poverty. That was proven today. And now we find out that 1 in 4 Canadians could possibly be living in poverty. It's unheard of in this country. It was never like this before. It just goes to show that everything that this government has done has made life worse for everyday Canadians. But you hear this government over and over again say, life has never been better for everyone here. Enjoy what you have and enjoy what we give you. The number that we heard today of Canadians in poverty could rise. It rises to 30% for Canadians aged 18 to 30 and to 44.5% for single-parent households, while 42% of renters can't afford 2 or more household essentials. 21.7% of Canadians can't cover an unexpected expense of more than $500, while 8.8% of Canadians can't pay their bills on time. On top of this, 7.2% of Canadians can't afford to heat or cool their homes. The truth is that working Canadians will have to foot the bill for this government's spending once again. And this government talks about tax fairness. Never have Canadians have had a bigger tax burden than after 9 years of this Liberal-NDP government. Let's start with the carbon tax scam. A scam that they hid from Canadians recently. Madam Speaker, did you know that they had a gag order on the PBO that was asking them to release a report, a damning report, that proved that the carbon tax scam committed $30 billion of economic vandalism. $30 billion that was taken away from the economy, taken away from workers, taken away paychecks from workers, investment into things like equipment and other capital. No wonder Canada's productivity is as worse as it was in 2014. In fact, it's 7 straight quarters of productivity decline. What does that mean? To the average person, that means Canadians are poor. And it's easy to tie that in with the poverty report that we see today. Despite the sunshine that this Liberal NDP government tries to portray with their economic vandalism over the last 9 years, the reality is that Canadians are more poor than they've ever been before, and it's only getting worse. They introduced tax hikes like the carbon tax scam. But the fact that they hid this damning report from their department, and it took the PBO the courage after Conservatives put pressure on to release this report that proves $30 billion was of hidden costs of this scam on Canadians. In fact, if it wasn't for the Conservatives putting on pressure and forcing papers to be released, surprise, surprise, the day that the vote was supposed to happen, they released the report. And what do you know? It proved what Canadians already know, that this Prime Minister and the carbon tax scam are not worth the cost. It's raised the cost of gas, groceries, and home heating. Its costs have gone up because of it to our farmers, to our truckers, and to everyone else. That's why we're seeing this record number of poverty rise in this country. They sold this scam as something that would automatically fix the environment. They tell you that if you pay a little bit more tax, we'll pour it over top of these forest fires and we'll put them out. The reality is that emissions have gone up, that those forest fires haven't gone down. Every claim that this government had that this carbon tax scam was to fix the environment was false. Their own department admitted that they don't tie in how much of this carbon tax scam is related to so-called what they say is it fixes climate change. It doesn't work like that. And that's why they're not tracking it. Even they know it's not worth the cost. Just yesterday, the PBO admitted to our common sense Conservatives that the cost of climate change would have no effect on the cost of the carbon tax scam to Canadians. He proved it. You just have to pull up the blues from the committee yesterday, and it's clear to see that they keep jacking up the carbon tax, but it's done nothing to fix the environment. And how embarrassing for a government who claims to be these stalwarts of the economy and environment, but their ranking on climate change index fell. It fell 4 spots, 62 out of 67 on the world stage. But it's on par with this embarrassing Prime Minister that jet sets around the world just to embarrass Canada further. We need serious leadership once again in this country. The PBO also said that Canadians pay more into this tax than what they get back. The claim that 8 out of 10 Canadians get more back in rebates than what they pay into it is false. And the PBO proved that over and over again. Carbon tax scam 1, which the PBO did costing on and an analysis on, proves that a majority of Canadians, 6 out of 10 households, are worse off because of this scam than what they pay into it or what they get back in rebates. And there's another part to this whole thing. It's called Carbon Tax Scam 2, the Clean Fuel Regulation. That has 0 rebate, and it affects every single Canadian in every province. And the PBO yesterday admitted to me that if a majority of Canadian households are worse off with Carbon Tax Scam 1 that has these phony rebates in it, then when you factor in Carbon Tax Scam number 2 that has no rebates on it, overall, a majority of households are still worse off. So their claim that it leaves Canadians better off is false. and it keeps getting proven wrong over and over again. And then on top of all of that, they introduce a job-killing capital gains tax hike, which is a direct attack on hardworking farmers, fishermen, physicians, tradespeople, home builders, and of course small business owners. Just today we heard from a plumber at Finance Committee talking about how his small business is his retirement savings. He didn't put money into RRSPs, and he doesn't have a pension because he put all his time, effort, and money into his business. He admits he's not rich. He's not one of the ultra-rich that this government keeps talking about. He did everything right. He worked as hard as he could to leave something for his kids and his grandkids and their kids after that. But on par with this Liberal-NDP government, hard work is punished in this country. I know many people that live in Calgary Forest Lawn that left the countries where they were from, took this big risk to come here. They took the risk because they wanted to come to a country that they were promised that if you worked hard, you could make something of yourself and leave something for your kids. But after 9 years of this Liberal-NDP government's failed economic policies, that Canadian dream that they were promised is broken. It's gone. That's why 9 out of 10 young people say they've lost the dream of home ownership. That's why 2 million Canadians are going into a food bank in a single month, and there's people living in their cars with good jobs or living in tents. And they have a government that won't stop attacking their success. In fact, they vilify success. Any type of profit, this greedy government, will do anything to fill its coffers, and in fact, the only people they really care about are rich Liberal insiders like the $22 billion in consultant fees that they pay. Not all Canadians are well connected like that. They wish they were, but this government is doing everything they can to work against hard-working Canadians. We heard from a farmer today who all he wanted to do was work hard, make food for Canadians, and leave his farm for his 4 daughters. But once again, this job-killing capital gains tax hike will ensure that less will go to his kids and their kids, and more will go to this greedy government. As I mentioned before, Canada is in a productivity crisis. GDP per person has gone down. That is literally the definition of how successful people are in this country, and it's gone down, and it continues to go down. In fact, this government drove away $460 billion of investment to the US. They made sure that US workers are getting paid better than Canadians. That means for every 58 cents of investment in a Canadian worker, that's what Canadian workers get for every dollar of investment that goes to an American worker. They've driven it all out with their high tax, high spend ideology that's driven away investment and workers from this country. And what did that do? That made talent leave as well. And with that, it made Canadians poorer. But let me tell Canadians something. Hope is on the horizon. Because it wasn't like this before this Liberal-NDP government, and it won't be like that after they're gone. Because after the next carbon tax election, when the member of Carleton becomes the Prime Minister of this country, Canadians will get what they deserve and what they've been promised by this common-sense Conservative government. We're going to axe the tax. We're going to take the tax off for good and for everybody to bring down the cost of grass, groceries, and home heating. We're going to build the homes by incentivizing municipalities to build, build, build. We are going to fix the budget, and we're going to bring in a dollar-for-dollar law. And indeed, we're going to make sure that income taxes are lower, simpler, and fair for all Canadians, and not punish hard work like we've seen under this government. And we're going to stop the crime. We've seen drugs, disorder, chaos all across this country increase. We're going to put an end to that. And Madam Speaker, we're going to bring home that Canadian dream once again, that if you put in hard work, you will be able to accomplish great things. We're going to bring it home.